Okay, let's start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. Our Lady, source of wisdom, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Me again. Hello. How are you? After sports, I hope you're awake. Okay, Father Johannes Nesco asked me to speak something about faith and reason. It's as the title uh, says, it's a wide topic. We can discuss philosophical and arguments, etc., etc. I wanted to start with a very specific topic because maybe it's the most useful for you nowadays, in these days, in university, if you are studying, etc. Even for the thing that Father Esco said about this story. And I wanted to start with a story, a very interesting story. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this person. His name is Alexis Carrel. He was a very good scientist, a doctor. He was a doctor. He received, in fact, the Nobel Prize in Medicine, so a very good doctor, top tier doctor. And his story is quite interesting because he was educated Catholic in a Catholic family. He went to the university. What happened? Agnostic, science, or it's not necessary. We need science. We do not need faith. That's superstition. That's something that is not useful. So he became agnostic. He didn't care about faith. At some point, he had a colleague who was a very good Catholic. And this colleague, at some point, was helping as a voluntary for Lourdes. You know, the sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes. No? This is an image of the sanctuary, if you haven't been there. It's in France, near to Spain. It's a place where Our Lady appeared and revealed that she was the Immaculate Conception. And the interesting thing is in that sanctuary, in the right side, there is like a stream of water, miraculous water, and they bring the sick people to that water because many miracles happen. So this scientist friend of Alexis Carrel was responsible to bring sick people to that sanctuary. It's very common. I don't know here, but in Italy, many sick people go, and voluntaries go with them. But the problem was that at that time, the friend of Alexis Carrel couldn't go for different reasons, his health and things like that. So he asked Alexis Carrel, can you go with that person, with this sick person, to the sanctuary? The answer of Alexis was, yes, I want to go. But inside he was thinking, I will confirm that everything is a hoax. I will confirm that faith is a superstition, that the water in Lourdes, it has no meaning, it's just fake news. So he accepted the challenge. And he went with this lady, Mary Bailey. She has a tuberculous peritonitis, and she was dying. She was dying. Even Alexis Carrel confirmed this. This lady was dying. The doctor said like a few weeks, and she was going to die. No cure for her. So when they arrived, they tried to bring, with Alexis accompanying her, they tried to bring Mary to this fountain of water. She was so weak that they couldn't put him inside the water, the pools. There are some pools that they bring the sick people. They couldn't do that, so they brought a jar of water, and they poured the water over the stomach, especially, this zone. And what happened was absolutely astonishing. The lady, Mary Bailey, started immediately recovering the color. She was almost white for the sickness. She was dying. She started recovering the color. The inflammation started disappearing, and some hours later, she was completely fine, walking without any sign of disease. Not only that, but a couple of days later, Alexis made a couple of tests to check on his health, completely cured. So you can imagine the surprise of Alexis. He wanted to disprove faith. That was his intention. And on the contrary, he was in front of a miracle. And the good thing is that he was sincere. He accepted evidence. Now we hear a lot about we have to accept evidence. He accepted evidence and he converted. And he became a very good Catholic, and he wrote his experience in Lourdes with this story. So the story of Alexis Carrel. As his story, you can find many stories. It's not an isolated case, only one in history. No, there are many cases like him. I just wanted to explain this because it's quite publicized. So it's very well known, this event. And for me, there are two aspects that are the most important one of this story for you. The first one is some people think that being a Christian, believing in Jesus Christ, the reason for that is because I want to believe. I was educated that way. It's some kind of auto-suggestion. I want to believe in Christ. I feel better with Christ, so I believe because of that. It might be true that in some cases that helps. I won't say that that's not true. But in this case, it was exactly the opposite. He was not looking to be convinced. He was looking to disprove faith. He was looking to reject and show the world that faith has nothing to do with health. Instead, he discovered. So it's false that the root or the basis for faith is autosuggestion. In this case, it's quite clear, quite the opposite. And the other aspect, and maybe the most common lie that we hear in our world, is that science is opposed to faith. Many people think that if you know hard science, you are going to discover that faith is some kind of superstition, nonsense, not scientific. So if you are scientific, you have to reject faith. In this case, you have not only a very good scientist who embrace faith, but the most interesting thing of this story in particular is the fact that because of his scientific knowledge, he was more convinced of faith, because he was the only one to understand how astonishing was the event. Maybe a regular person might have said, yeah, extraordinary. Yeah, I see that she got healed. But Alexis Carrel, because of his scientific knowledge, was able to understand that that was absolutely impossible. So his science was the reason for his conversion. Very interesting story in this sense. So this has to be stated very clearly that science is not opposed to faith, and in some cases can lead to faith. Good science, we'll see, can lead us to faith. And in this sense, it's interesting to note, we hear that scientists, generally speaking, probably are atheists. No? Most of them probably are atheists. The fact is quite the contrary. If you go to the statistic of the physics Nobel Prizes, science is considered like the top experimental science. No? So physics Nobel Prize is quite an interesting measure. More than 90% of the scientific persons that receive the Nobel Prize believe in the existence of God. So this idea that being a scientist and not having faith is just factually not true. You can imagine 10 very good scientific people. Only 1 in 10 is atheist, does not have any kind of faith. And if we check on the great characters of science, we can discover that they were believers. I'm going to name just a few, but if you go into the list, it's a huge list. And you can discover that the most prominent scientific figures were people that believe in God or believe in some kind of religion. Schrödinger, for those who like physics, is the father of quantum mechanics. He was Catholic. Louis Pasteur, also Catholic, founder of modern microbiology. He discovered that life comes from life. That there were people that thought that life could come from not organic matter. He demonstrated that that was fake. Georges Lemaitre, we are going to speak about him. Very important case, very important. You have to know him. He was a Belgian Catholic priest. Gertie Corey, she was Catholic. She received the Medicine Nobel Prize. These two also very important, Jerome Lejeune and Gregor Mendel, Catholic. Gregor Mendel was a friar, Augustinian friar. He's the father of genetics. He was the one that started, in some sense, the experiments on genetics transformation. Alexander Fleming, the one who discovered penicillin, he was a Catholic. The famous Nikola Tesla, not the cars, please. The one who designed alternating current, he was Orthodox. And we can go on, the list is huge, no? But this to show that the top scientists in history, most of them have faith, So the first, before to the conclusion of this part, there is a very beautiful phrase, very true phrase from Louis Pasteur. He said, a little science distances you from God, but a lot of science brings you nearer to Him. The more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Very interesting. The first part is very true. How many people consider, those people that consider that science is against faith normally have a very superficial scientific knowledge? No, that's why a little science might give you the illusion of some knowledge that is going to replace faith. But when you start getting deeper into faith, you understand that you need a creator, you need some designer. And this is the experience of many scientists. I've read a couple of testimonies, not all of them, but a lot of testimonies of scientists is that when you study more, when you open the door of the mysteries of nature, every new discovery reveals a marvelous creation. So instead of being an obstacle to faith, normally scientific discoveries are demanding a cause, are demanding a creator. So this is the concrete link that normally scientific people experience. So this is the first conclusion of this part, and this is the most important thing I would say in my talk. Because, I'm tired of listening people that think the opposite. Science is not an obstacle for faith at all. Not factually true. On the contrary, as we have seen, normally science and scientific people get close to faith. Okay, and now we have to continue. But at this point, clear? This is clear? Okay, good. This is very, very important to reject the myth that in some universities and places, it's very, very common. Another interesting fact that I didn't mention is the percentage of atheists, for example, is greater in literature. So in art and human science, you have more people that do not believe in God, not science, contrary to what many people believe. 35% of literature Nobel Prize were atheists, declare not believing in God. Interesting. I'm not against literature, please. Okay, this is the first historical part. Now we enter into lesson mode. Now we have to learn some concepts to grow our mind and to understand a little bit about the Christian vision of reason and faith. Yeah, the Christian vision of reason and faith. So when we say the word reason, what are we talking about? You can define, there is a very big discussion in philosophy. We are not trying to do that here. We are just going to say that reason is the human, or is the capacity for knowing the truth. Reason is the capacity for knowing the truth. And it's a very specific capacity of human beings. In fact, it defines us. We are defined by philosophers, animals with reason. And in fact, it's something that distinguishes us from the rest of the material world. For example, animals. If you see a dog is able to know, to sense a piece of meat, and he can move by instinct and eat that meat. True, yeah. But our capacity is much greater. We cannot only eat food, but we can also, for example, theorize about food. We can discuss if Irish food is better than Dutch food or things like that. I don't want to enter into that. But our capacity of knowing the reality is much greater than just a sensible capacity, like the animals. And for this reason, we have the capacity to theorize, to analyze, to know universal truths. We have the capacity of language. Language is a very important human capacity based on reason. So this capacity, in some sense, put the human being over the whole material creation. Absolutely outside, in some sense, the material creation. It's a spiritual capacity. But our reason, our intelligence, also another word for reason is intelligence, has different ways of knowing the truth. It's not that the mind can instantly know everything. It has to reach the truth through different means. So what are the different ways in which the reason can know the truth? The first one, experience. I see you and my reason understand that you exist, for example. So my intelligence is knowing through the experience. That's one way of knowing the truth. I know that you are here. That I'm knowing this through my senses. The second way of knowing the truth is theory. I pick an experimental data and I start thinking and processing the information, and I can reach other truths that I didn't see, but with my reason I am able to see, to reach those truths that I wasn't able to experiment. Yeah? So for example, most science arrived to conclusion with this method. No? We can say that relativity theory or different scientific theories and conclusions are this kind of process. With my capacity, I'm able to process the truth and arrive to some other truth. And then there is a third way of knowing the truth, very important. I don't know why this image. But there are some things that we by ourselves, we cannot experience, we cannot maybe think, but somebody else can tell me what the truth is. Yeah? For example, somebody outside can tell me there is no one outside. I cannot see. I am not able to see. But I can believe that person and I can reach certain truths through the testimony of that person. So this is a third way of knowing the truth that we might call general faith. We will call it that way. This is like the faith in the most broad sense, general faith. So I believe somebody that told me, for example, I arrived here, I started asking about Dutch history and Dutch facts and things that I don't know, and I believe the person. So normally I can know truths through the testimony of other person. And a very important thing is that many truths that we know it this way, through faith. You can think in your life, the date of your birth, somebody told you. Where were you born? Somebody told you. Even lessons, maybe I'm not understanding perfectly the reasoning of the teacher, so in some sense, I'm believing the teacher. So if you start analyzing your knowledge, many truths you have now, you reach them through faith. And it's so important, faith, for general faith, we are speaking about general faith, for our life, that we can use an extreme example, no? A fire starts in a building, I'm there, and a firefighter comes, and it tells, I'm asking what I have to do, and he tells me, for saving your life, you have to go through that door. I cannot experience fire. If I experience fire, I'm dead. So not a good option. I could study fire theory to know how the fire develops, but I don't have time. So if I try to do that, I'm also dead. So the rational option, the rational, intelligent option at that time is believing the person, because a firefighter normally knows what he's saying. So based on the authority of that person, I'm believing him. I believe what he's saying. So it's very important to understand not only that general faith is a very common way of knowledge, but also it's very rational. It's normal. Normal people understand that faith is necessary for living. So it is irrational. This is very interesting. It is irrational to reject general faith as a way of knowing the truth. And I put Chesterton because Chesterton, if you don't know him, he's a British author, very funny, Catholic, very good. And he jokes with another author. The other author was an empirist, only believed in experience and rejected faith. So he started joking that everything we know, or most of the things we know, are through faith. What I already told you. So second conclusion, more theoretical conclusion, general faith is a way for a reason to know the truth. Yeah? Here? Clear? Okay. Now the problem is to understand what's the connection of this general faith with what kind of faith? Supernatural? Exactly, with supernatural faith. Because we are not only thinking, when we speak about faith, we normally are not thinking about general faith, the testimony of another person here, but I'm thinking about the truth about God, about supernatural realities. So we have to link this to the fact of supernatural faith. For this, there are several ways to reach this point. I just wanted to start with a very interesting fact. It's also one of the biggest discussions in philosophy, that you have like two models of thinking reality. You have two ways of thinking reality. There is what is called the philosophy of transcendence, that thinks that reality is more perfect, exceeds everything we can think. So we can study a lot, we can think a lot, we can process a lot, but always reality is going to be greater, is going to be more perfect than everything we can understand. Instead, the other view is immanence. Immanence tend to think that reality is what I think, or reality identifies what I think. So there cannot be anything outside thinking. So I don't want to enter into philosophical debate, but this is like the most radical division in philosophy and in human thinking, generally speaking. Chesterton uses a strong metaphor in his book Orthodoxy. He said the common sense thinker put his head into reality and discovered the marvel of reality, not the marvel of creation. For this philosophy, it's no problem that there are things we don't know, because it's part of how I conceive reality. Instead, he says the crazy thinker, the ideologue, wants to put the whole world inside his mind, inside his head, and his head blows up. That's the analogy he uses, no? So this is the great difference on how we think reality. And in this distinction, we can use two very concrete examples. For example, if I have a boy, 10-year-old boy, I can try to explain to him some theory, some mathematical theory that is true. And he won't be able to understand. But the fact that he doesn't understand, it doesn't mean that the theory is not true. He's just not able, he has not the capacity to understand that truth. And we can also have the example of the sun. We have a capacity to see light reflected in colors, but we cannot see sun directly, not because it's not, it has no light, but because it has too much light. Our eyes cannot process too much light. These two examples are very important to understand that this is the same situation for us regarding divine realities. Our constitution is naturally made to know material things. So when we try to grasp the spiritual, the things that are over this material reality, it's very difficult for our mind. So there are things that with our natural capacity, we cannot reach. And some people say, okay, I cannot think the divine. I cannot think about these realities. What is the problem? Do not think about it. No problem. Many people try to do that. But the big problem is that we have questions that demands an answer with these realities. All of us are going to have this question at some point in our life. What happens after I die? What happens after I die? The question about salvation. Everyone is going to have this question. Second, what is the meaning of my existence? What is the meaning of my existence? Third, who is God? Why He created me? So these questions are so important to our life that who we are and what we do in life depends on the answers we have to these questions. The answer to this question are going to determine our life. And we do not have an answer with our capacity, with our natural capacity of knowing things. We do not have an answer for this question. So we need some help in this sense. We need some kind of answer. And that, especially there, is where we consider that Jesus Christ appeared. He, being the Son of God, came to earth as a witness of the divine reality to communicate to us those realities, those answers that all of us need, that every one of us need, but by our natural capacity we cannot know. So Jesus Christ came to do this work, to teach us about those realities that we cannot reach. And that is why we call it a revelation. He took the veil on these truths. And the Bible is quite clear about this. The Bible is quite clear on the role of Christ on revealing divine truths. If we read Hebrews 11:1, faith is the realization of what is hoped for, and evidence of things not seen. So we have faith for knowing the things that we cannot see, of those realities that are spiritual, and with our capacity we have difficulty thinking. And especially about Jesus Christ, John chapter 1, at the end of the prologue, the beautiful prologue on the Gospel of John, no one has ever seen God. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. So we cannot know the true identity of God, but Christ came as a witness to reveal us the intimacy of God. That is, for example, why we know the nature of the Trinity, thanks to the revelation of Christ. We know what grace is. We know the sacraments. We know how to get to heaven. So all of these things, Christ came to give us an answer. And we are linked to this source of revelation through three concrete stances or means. No? Scriptures that contain the message, the written message of Jesus Christ, the tradition that also kept the message and the revelation of Christ, and magisterium, which is not properly a source, but is the authority that Christ determined for keeping revelation safe, not contaminated. Yeah, this is why Christ wanted magisterium. So now, with this new aspect, we can distinguish reason. Normally, when we speak, for example, if you take the encyclica of John Paul II, very good encyclica. It's a bit technical, but it's very good. If you want to get deep into this topic, I advise you to read it. But when we normally hear reason and faith, normally by reason, you understand the truths that I can know with my natural capacities. There are some truths that I can know with my natural capacities, and faith are the truths that I receive as a revelation from God. So the object of, we are not speaking here about general faith, but specifically of supernatural faith, are those truths that I accept for the testimony of Christ, based on the testimony of Christ as a revelation from God. So the third conclusion, very important, supernatural faith allows us to know the mysteries of God. The mysteries of God. And we can analyze the role of reason and faith, and we have to say that they are not the same. Natural knowledge is not the same that faith. It's not the same reading the Bible and accepting the nature of God because God revealed himself. It's not the same that, for example, Aristotle's study of God. They are different. So it's not the same, the natural knowledge of reason and faith. But it's true that they are complementary. It cannot be contradiction. What faith says, faith is allowing me to reach some truth that my natural capacity is not able to reach, but faith is not going to say something against what is rational. It's over-rational, but it's not against reason. That's very important. So in this sense, we have to reject the two biggest mistakes in this area are rationalism. Rationalism pretends that the only knowledge is the only valid knowledge is the knowledge of my natural capacity, so they totally reject faith. Or they reduce faith to rational reasoning, which is insane. Which is insane. Like, for example, there are rationalist theologians, and they try to interpret the stories of Jesus Christ. And when they read that Jesus Christ walked over the waters, they say, no, in fact, the reason for that is because the lake was frozen. So they reduced miracles to natural realities. Totally absurd. Totally absurd. So that is rationalism. The other extreme that we have to be careful is fideism, which means despising natural capacity to know the truth, especially in some Protestant denominations. They are strong on this. They consider all natural knowledge as invalid, especially about God, absolutely invalid, so we only have to use faith. In the end, it's a self-destroying position, because the foundation of faith is always our natural capacity to know. So if you are rejecting reason, in a way you are rejecting the base for the act of faith. And there is a very beautiful phrase from G.K. Chesterton that says, the church asks us to take off our hats, not our heads. So the church does not demand to be irrational, just to have the openness to receive revelation. So we have like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something like that. One last point I wanted to do, I do not have time, but maybe it can help you. In this relation of faith and reason, one very important point are some truths that are in between, that our natural capacity can discover and are the basis for accepting faith. So these 4 truths, and there are many more, but these are 4 specific truths, we can discover with thinking. We do not need faith for these truths. Just by thinking rationally, we can discover these truths, and if I accept this truth, I'm closer to accepting faith. So you will notice that many atheists tend to reject these truths that are not based on faith, are just thinking. So we can reject materialism, thinking that all that it is material, the ability to know the truth, or reject relativism. Relativism is a self-contradictory thesis. No? If you say there is no universal truth, they say, the relativists say that, but they are affirming a universal truth. If you say there is no universal truth, well, at least one, that there is no universal truth. So it's self-contradictory. The existence of God, very important. Philosophers and even a person discovering the amazing nature of reality can discover the existence of God. Especially now with science, every time it's more clear, because the wonders of creation are each day more clear. So watching the perfection and the order of the universe, our mind can conclude rationally that God exists as a designer. And then also the immortality of the soul. Okay, I'm going to... So, 4th conclusion, reason and faith are complementary. Last part of the talk. So we have first the historical, factual, scientist faith part. Then we have the theory of reason and faith, general faith and supernatural faith. And now we go back a little bit about science, because I want to speak about a specific thing about the theory of science. Every science has its own method, no? Every science has its own object. For example, medicine study the human being considering his health, no? The fact of the health. So that is medicine. In the case of experimental science, the object, as the name says, what's the object of experimental science? Experiment. So the object has to be tangible truths, material. So the object of experimental science are the things that can be measured, can be quantified, can be experimented, can be also, there is a very important concept now that you have to be able to do science, hard science, to repeat the experiment. If it's not replicable, verifiable, yeah, and replicable also. So science can only say a scientific affirmation about those aspects. It cannot say something about other things because its method is not able to do that. The problem is that at some point, especially 1 century ago, the science had a great development. We cannot deny that. Science is great. Science is able to show us many truths of the world, but it cannot analyze certain realities, especially the spiritual ones. Because the spiritual ones, the ones that are non-material, by definition, cannot say a thing about the non-material thing. So demanding that science say something about God is not possible as science. If the science would be able to do an experiment of God, God would not be God. Yeah? So the science in this sense, or the reality of God, it's outside the proper method of experimental science. And I use a very basic example. If you have a magnifying glass, I give all of you a magnifying glass, and I tell you, study the stars. Tell me something with a magnifying glass about the stars. What are you going to say? There are no stars. With a magnifying glass, you cannot see a star. So if you reduce the reality to the method of a science, you are losing part of the reality. So that is the problem for those who pretend to study God or who pretend to study some non-material realities with hard science. The method does not allow it. So, fifth conclusion, science is not able to directly study the object of faith. Science is not able to directly study the object of faith with its own method. We can use the data of science to do philosophy, even to consider the harmony with theology, but we cannot at all study with the scientific method the non-material realities. And this is about the importance of philosophy. Last point before the questions, the Big Bang and George Lemaitre. Big Bang and George Lemaitre. Do you know the theory of Big Bang? Yeah, or less? Yeah, okay. So for me, it was funny that Father Esco brought that story at the introduction, because there are some people that still now think that the Big Bang, in some sense, it's against faith. It's totally the opposite, but completely the opposite. It's not that just maybe you can interpret that in some sense. No. The Big Bang is just the opposite. The one who created, the first man that thought of the idea of the Big Bang was this Belgian priest, very good priest, George Lemaitre, and very good physicist. Yeah, George Lemaitre. And the main thesis of Big Bang is that all the matter that we see in our world comes from a point where everything, all the matter was together, and then rapidly expanded, exploded, that's why the name Big Bang, and all the galaxies started forming. According to scientific calculation, we are speaking about 30.7 billion years ago. 30.7 billions of years ago. This theory was kind of a revolution, because at the time, the normal thinking in science was that matter was eternal, and you don't have like a explosive or a or this kind of a starting point where all the matter was together. The interesting thing is that George Lemaitre, his theory was based on relativity theory, the creator of not relativism, but relativity, which is very different. Relativity theory of Albert Einstein. So he based his calculation on that, and he, thinking about the theory of Einstein, thought of this idea that the world has to be expanded, And he presented his conclusion to Einstein, and Einstein answered, "Your math is perfect, but your physics is abominable." So Einstein do not agree with George Lemaitre. Quite interesting. So you see, at this point you say, well, the priest is wrong, of course, obviously. Einstein is Einstein, so we have to accept in science Einstein. Well, the fact was that after that, many experiments started to being developed, and the Big Bang was confirmed in many, many ways. And the same Einstein recognized that he was wrong and that the priest was right. So all today, if you go to the physics world, the Big Bang is like the standard model of the universe. Most of, I mean, it's very weird to deny the model. It's confirmed by many, many observations, experiments of all kinds. I don't have the time to explain. It's very interesting. But there are many experiments that confirm that the galaxies are expanding, and at some point, the galaxies, according to the physics of how the physics work, we know that 13 billion years ago, all the matter was together and expanded in this way. In fact, it's funny that the name Big Bang is a joke. The people, to joke the priest, they started calling the Father Big Bang. This is the Father Big Bang, because they were joking. They thought it was not possible what he was proposing. And with time, it became the standard model for the universe. This is a drawing and explanation of the different stages of Big Bang. And the interesting thing, again, Dawkins, this is a debate of Dawkins and Cardinal Pell, is very interesting. But the thing is that for atheist scientific, the Big Bang is a great problem. It's a great problem because it strongly suggests it cannot scientifically demonstrate the creation by God. You cannot do that with the scientific method. But it strongly suggests that somebody produces all matter in the universe at some point in time. So it's very interesting to read atheist scientists that say, clearly state, in this debate it's very clear, there are many scientists trying to do this, that they say we're trying to find another explanation different from the Big Bang, not because we have scientific evidence, but because we don't like the idea of God. So even they are admitting that the Big Bang, in some sense, is strongly suggesting the need for a creator. Yeah? So this is how we can see, even in science, in hard science, the harmony between science and faith. I don't have the time for evolution. I wanted to say something about the Eucharistic miracles, very interesting, but I have to end now. So we can ask, as the disciples did, Lord, increase our faith. Thank you.
So we have time for some questions. So
Can I ask you to use the time you use answering the first question to quickly say what the Eucharistic miracle means?
You're smart. Now, I wanted to finish this story because for me, it's quite good an example as the first one. No? The first one is a very good example to understand how science and faith meets. In this case, it's also very clear. In Argentina, year 1996, regular parish in a city, the priest was giving communion. One of the hosts, a couple of hosts fell to the ground. So they followed the regular procedure, and they put the host in a glass of water to dissolve. No? In some places you do that. And they left the glass of water inside the tabernacle to dissolve. They came back a couple of weeks later, and the host became like red, with red and kind of flesh. So they were absolutely astonished by this fact. But they did a very interesting, the thing is not only that is like a regular Eucharistic miracle, but they did a very interesting thing, which is they took samples and they sent them to one of the best laboratories in New York, I guess. I don't remember exactly, but they sent to a very prestigious laboratory, and it was a blind test. So they didn't say what was the origin of that sample. It's like, you are a scientist, I send you some tissue, but I do not say what was the origin. So the scientific person, the scientist was a cardiologist, very recognized cardiologist, and started testing. He could not believe his eyes because he discovered that the tissue was cardiac tissue. Okay, interesting, part of the heart. In fact, he identified what specific part of the heart. And the most, he also identified that the tissue has damages of pressure, like a person suffering has specific ways of, the tissue has a specific form, so he know that person suffered, not only that it was hard, but it was a heart that suffered, a person that suffered a lot. And the most astonishing thing was that he found white blood cells. You might say, okay, it's blood, obviously white blood cells. No, the fact is that after you die, a couple of, some minutes after you die, blood cells, white blood cells disappear. So in a dead body, you cannot find white blood cells. And in this sample, he found that it was a living blood, because you have white blood cells. And that was the conclusion, astonishing conclusion. He sent the test without understanding anything. And yeah, and you can go and visit the miracle nowadays in Argentina. And some of the scientists that work there also converted for this fact. No, it was so clear that they say this has to be true. Yeah.
Okay, wow.
I have a question regarding the Big Bang. I have a question regarding the Big Bang. The Big Bang that maybe sometimes produces argument for the existence of God because something happened and caused it. Well, I read an argument against that, saying you can have a cause, but a cause always an effect, but there's time needed to get from a cause to an effect. And since there was no time before the Big Bang, then you can't apply the rule of causality to the Big Bang. So you can't say that the Big Bang has a cause, because there was no time before the Big Bang. How would you respond to such an argument?
Yeah. I read and I hear a lot about this debate.
God is outside of time, right? So that argument doesn't apply.
Yeah, but I think he's not arguing the fact that God is outside time, but the fact that you need time to produce Big Bang, something like that.
If you want to use the rule of causality to prove that the Big Bang had to have a cause, then you need to assume that there was time before the Big Bang, which there wasn't. So you can't apply the rule of causality to it.
Yeah, the general answer to that question is that you have causalities of different orders. So there are some causes that, by definition, as you exactly said, by definition, when matter was created, you have time created. Time is a property of material realities. So when you create a material reality, it has time. It's not that you have. So for applying the rule of causality to God as if God is a cause of the same order, that is to say material cause, then you need time. But since God is, at least the hypothesis is that God is outside of time and it has the ability to cause timely beings, I think that rule cannot be applied.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
So that rule, I would say, is true for the causalities we know here in this world, but the hypothesis of God as being outside of matter and time, you shouldn't need that.
So basically it's made an argument for God because no physical thing could have caused the Big Bang, so it has to be outside of time, which you can maybe make an argument.
Well, the ones that are trying to make the ones that do this argument say exactly that some physics law like demands some cause outside matter and time, and that is by definition should be God. Yeah, yeah.
One last short question.
Anyway, I'm going just to say something. I don't know that might be a little bit problematic, which is the philosophical arguments for the existence of God do not need the Big Bang as an argument. So I would say that for sure the Big Bang brings you the idea of God. But I'm not saying that the discussion is over, that you can use Big Bang to demonstrate the existence of God. I think that is an open discussion because the same idea of the Big Bang, you can discuss the value until which point the Big Bang is able to demonstrate something. In that sense, I think that the second law of the thermodynamics, who knows this, is a stronger argument than the Big Bang. Yeah, but okay.
Last short question.
Yeah. So in these kind of discussions, I think it's quite common that people would say that science is something that is objective. So some people say that science is something that is objective, whereas faith is kind of subjective and you choose your own. They would also point to maybe the amount of different religions there exists, and then they would say, yeah, there's so much diversity that you can't really find truth in that. So then my question is, how should we approach these kind of arguments? Or in other words, how can we point to the fact that faith is also something that is objective and that there's truth in it? Or also, how can we show that the Christian faith compared to other ones has something particular that points to truth?
Short question, not a short answer.
No, but it's a very good question. It's something that I was thinking to include in my talk, but I was not able for the matter of time. There is a phrase in the gospel that applies to that. Christ says, "The one who seeks finds." No, so it's one of the problems with that is that many people are like accept their situation and are not looking for the truth. So that's a subjective problem, but not an objective problem. There is a whole section of Catholic theology which is apologetics and the motives to believe. And there are great discussions about this to show what are the signs for the true religion. So you can identify some aspect where you can distinguish what the true religion are. The top ones is you should look for the truth in miracles and prophecy. Those are the signs of the hand of God. So if you see a miracle and if you see a prophecy, you see God is there. So that's why I chose two stories of miracles to show that there is a link with the activity of God that is quite clear, we cannot deny. And in fact, the people that saw, even not having faith, recognized that there was the truth. But you have other kind of considerations. For example, how the Catholic faith is expanded. Because in other faiths you have force, you have military expansion. Instead, in the case of Catholic propagation, is the opposite. You have men that were absolutely weak; they were not wise, and you have this. Saint Augustin said that it's a miracle how the faith expanded. So you can also consider those kind of things. Now there is one last thing I wanted to say. In the gospel, Jesus Christ uses this argument. In the gospel, there is this section where Jesus Christ said to the Pharisees, the one who were persecuting him, he says, "Do not believe my words, but believe the signs I'm doing." So he's doing this argument. Do not look at what I'm saying, but look at the fact of the miracles. So I think that's part of the answer.